Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Friday, August 5th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Notre Dame game is in 29 days, the game against Michigan in 113 days. Ohio State opened its fall camp yesterday at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. Tony Gerderman and I recorded an episode of Buckeye Weekly to talk all about that and what we learned on day one of fall. You can find that on the Buckeye Weekly podcast feed in all the places you can find this show, including on the Buckeye Huddle YouTube channel. Today we're going to be looking at some bigger picture stuff, including a look at the Big Ten on the whole, where the Buckeyes fit into the national title picture, and who else could be a threat in the college football playoff. My guest is Brett Ciancia. He is the publisher of Pick 6 Previews. This year, for the first time, there's not only an electronic magazine, but also a hard copy. I ordered mine and have been going through it since it arrived earlier this week. Had a little issue where I couldn't find it earlier today, and then realized my son had taken it. He was checking it out. Lots of great stuff in there. It is the most accurate Power 5 preview in the last decade, which I guess my son has good taste in preview magazines just like I do. Definitely worth your time. Brett, thanks for being here.
Yeah, well, thanks, Tom. First off, thanks for buying the book. Thanks for having me on. And it sounds like we have a young Pick 6 fan. That's great news. And also congrats on the official launch of Buckeye Huddle. I know when you have that many solid Buckeye insiders together, great minds there, I'm sure it's going to be a great product. So excited to see that come to fruition and really excited to talk about the 2022 season. One of the craziest, like Tom said, it's been a decade of Pick 6 Previews. This is the 11th edition. This was number one, the most difficult to put together, the most complex with the coaching carousel, the transfer portal. So I'm just really excited to break it down for you guys.
Well, let's start with the Buckeyes. They fell short of their big three goals last year, beating Michigan, winning the Big Ten, and winning the national title. But you seem pretty optimistic they should be able to do at least two of those three and possibly all three this year. So what has you so bullish on the Buckeyes?
Well, it starts with the offense, and you saw it last year. It was the number one rated offense in America by my metrics, and by far, too. There's a sizable gap as the best offense, and the core of it is back. I know you lose two first-round receivers, but the way that Brian Hartline has recruited at the receiver position, it's 5 stars galore, and you saw a couple of them come to step into their new roles in the Rose Bowl. And then at the quarterback, you have a Heisman favorite in C.J. Stroud. At running back, Travion Henderson, another freshman phenom that burst out last year. Like the offensive line, there's enough back to have a cohesive unit. So basically, I know the offense is going to be one of the best in the country again, if not number one again. The question for this team for 2022 was defense. And you saw a couple holes in the defense last year. It was actually an above-average defense for most of the year, just had 2 black eyes, and that was against the 2 physical power run games of Oregon and Michigan. Michigan ran it at will there to not only snap the Ohio State-Michigan streak, but to knock Ohio State out of playoff contention. So you look ahead to 2022, a couple pointers are pointing up for this defense. Number one being the returning production number. I use this a lot. There's a clear indication. If you're bringing back top 10, top 15 numbers of returning production, that's starters, backups, snaps, everything. There's a clear indication of improvement year over year, and Ohio State is scheduled for that. It's really rare that these blue bloods and these NFL draft pipeline programs return so much talent. Usually it's all gone to the pros, but it was a young defense last year and it's all back. So that's one part of it. The second part is the defensive coordinator. And, after that Michigan game, Ryan Day, he cleared house on defense and brings in Jim Knowles, who turned around Oklahoma State. Normally you think Big 12, you think Oklahoma State as a shootout, they're winning games 60-50, but not so much with Jim Knowles. He turned them around into one of the best in the country last year. So, really a lot to like on both sides of the ball. The offense is proven. The defense is improving. And I have Ohio State winning the Big Ten and returning to the playoff.
This season's Ohio State schedule starts with Notre Dame in just over 4 weeks and 1 day to be exact. Almost here. Can't wait. That is obviously a game that has drawn a ton of attention in Columbus, as well as around Ohio and realistically around the rest of the country. Probably the most anticipated non-conference game I can remember. How good are the Irish going to be this year? And I guess what are the question marks they're going to need to find answers to before they get to Columbus?
Yeah, well, on a program level, they've been a consistent winner, a consistent top 10 team and playoff contender under Brian Kelly. But they go through a coaching transition, obviously bringing in Marcus Freeman, a former Buckeye himself, former Silver Bullet there. He's coming back for a homecoming game. That's quite the opening test for him. So they're kind of in a transition year coaching-wise. The rest of the staff around him has remained intact, though. So we'll see how big a transition that really is. But specifically roster-wise, Oregon and Michigan last year, they really laid the foundation. They laid the blueprint for Notre Dame because it's a similar roster on offense where it's based around a powerful offensive line. This Notre Dame offensive line could be one of the best in the country. They return 4 starters, and they bring back actually their old offensive line coach that coached all those greats from about a decade ago, all those NFL draft picks. So, it's going to be a strong power run game. There is a change of quarterback after 4 years of Ian Book and 1 year last year with a transitional quarterback. They now have a dual threat, which is rare for Notre Dame. You never see that from them, but a true athlete coming in, a young guy, a 5-star from California. So, so a little bit different there at quarterback, but it's the same physical front, and it's going to test this new Jim Knowles defense right away. That was the one concern I hit on, and they're going to be tested right away.
So that is Notre Dame, very clearly the biggest threat on the non-conference schedule. No disrespect to Arkansas State or Toledo, but so that's Notre Dame. That's the non-conference. Who is the biggest threat to the Buckeyes in the conference schedule in the Big Ten East? You got Michigan State and Penn State and Michigan. Every year, one of them seems like they rise up and present a threat. And last year, Michigan got Ohio State. Is there a team that matches up well with Ohio State on their schedule this year? Who's the biggest threat in the East?
Yeah, well, I saw 2 contenders for this question and for second place in the Big Ten East. It was between Michigan and Penn State. First with Penn State, they recruit at a great clip. They just signed one of the best recruiting classes in school history there at number 6. But I think all that talent is still a year or 2 away from really contributing to a conference title run. So they're still stuck there with Sean Clifford. He's a proven product, but you kind of know his ceiling there. I don't see them contending for the division. And lastly, with Penn State, when you're talking about an even year, an even or odd year, but this one being in Happy Valley, I had that circled as a whiteout game, and just leave it up to Fox to throw their big money bag in the way and ruin that. So it stinks for Penn State fans. Ohio State's are probably loving that because they dodge a bullet. One of the hardest home game atmospheres to play in. So instead of a prime time whiteout, you have a noon kickoff there at Penn State. I think it's a huge plus for Ohio State. But I ultimately decided on Michigan for number 2 in the East. Actually number 6 overall in Michigan. I think they're still a strong team. A lot of the core of what you saw last year offensively is back. They were the number 1 offensive line in a lot of my numbers. And I think 4 out of 5 are back up front, including multiple All-American candidates, multiple all-conference talents. And really, I just spoke to this with Notre Dame, their offensive line. But again, Ohio State will be tested by this front. Jim Harbaugh and this offensive team, they put this in for 365 days. They called it the Beat Ohio drill. I don't know if you've seen this, but at the end of every practice for an entire year, they blasted heavy metal music, Smash Mouth music, and just did a physical goal line drill with the idea. They called it Beat Ohio. And we saw that unfold for 4 quarters there last year. So we'll see a measuring stick of how far the Ohio State defensive line and the defensive front 7 have come. Ultimately, what held me back from making Michigan finish higher was the transition on defense. It was a lot of multi-year veterans, star players, and their coordinators gone. Really, both coordinators are gone, actually. But I think that the Broyles Award was given to the wrong Michigan coordinator. I think that Mike McDonald, what he did on defense was masterful. And he's gone along with Josh Gaddis on offense. But Gaddis, to me, didn't really do as much specifically. It was more Harbaugh going back to his old Stanford style. Gaddis tried to put in what he called speed and space, basically trying to copy what Ohio State did, and it didn't work. So last year in 2021, Harbaugh flipped it back to the old Stanford model, and it worked. So all that to say, Michigan's the biggest threat. They don't have enough on defense to match Ohio State or slow them down. I think Ohio State wins the rematch this year and wins the conference.
I think there are a lot of people in agreement on at least 2 of the playoff teams this year, Alabama and Ohio State. Those seem like almost universal choices. And I think a decent number would have Georgia in that group as well, which you do as well. So you've got those are 3 of your 4 playoff picks this year. But what was interesting to me was the 4th team you have in there, and that's Utah. Now, that's a team that Ohio State fans have obviously seen up close recently and probably have a newfound respect for after the Utes gave them 60 minutes of very, very tough football in the Rose Bowl. Utah has a very tough road trip to Gainesville to face Florida early on. So what is it about the Utes that makes you think they're going to be able to crack the playoff field this year?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. There are so many candidates for that 4th spot. I mean, I think you're right on that. It's kind of a consensus that you have Alabama, Ohio State, and Georgia as the 3 superpower recruiters and programs. I think they're proven products. But yeah, that 4th spot's wide open. So what I did was I tried to look at the other 3 leagues the ACC, the Big 12, the Pac-12, and who is most likely to come out of their leagues as a conference champ with either 0 or 1 loss. Out in the ACC, I'll start there. Some contenders like Clemson, NC State, Miami. There's some good potential there, but I think that with Clemson's offense, that really debilitates them. That really puts a ceiling on their growth. They were the worst offense in the ACC last year per my metrics, and I watched their spring game. I don't really see an overnight fix at quarterback. DJU was still overthrowing guys and skipping them in the dirt. It was not looking great. So I think they'll get tripped up a couple times. NC State's also a legitimate threat in the ACC too, but not quite playoff potential. Then I went over to the Big 12, and even more wide open than the ACC. You could consider 5 teams contenders for this league. Oklahoma going through a huge coaching transition. Baylor is the defending champs, but they lose their whole defense. Not to oversimplify it, but I think 7 starters are gone and quarterback gone. So then I went over to the Pac-12, and this is a team with Utah that their record last year is a little bit misleading. When you see that 4-loss number, you think, why would you pick them for the playoff? Really, they picked the wrong quarterback last preseason, and they had Charlie Brewer starting the first 3 games. They went 1-2. Once Cam Rising took over, they were playing playoff caliber football the rest of the way. He helped them destroy Oregon twice, beat USC, blew them out, blew out UCLA, and then, of course, took Ohio State down to the wire, a game you guys are familiar with. And yeah, I know that Ohio State was missing some NFLers in the game, but I think that going toe-to-toe with the Buckeyes really helped with their national reputation. And lastly, I watch every spring game I can find, and usually it's two-hand touch or thud or quarterbacks for non-contact. Not in Utah, and they were smashing each other. I mean, broken face masks, crushing quarterbacks, and that translates into it's symbolic of their overall physicality as a team and a defense. That's a long fan, or if you had I like Utah to do it.
It can seem like the top of the sport is kind of predictable at this point. It's some combination of Alabama and Georgia and Ohio State and Clemson pretty much every year at the top of the sport winning the national championship. But one of the fun things about college football is some of the surprises. There's always a team or two that kind of comes out of nowhere, either to have a better season than expected or just win a lot more games or have a big turnaround. Who are some teams? Give us a couple teams who you think could be really surprise teams this year, big turnaround teams this year.
Yeah, Tom, I love this question. I mean, it's August. Everyone's undefeated. I'm an eternal optimist. I love talking surprise teams and bounce back teams, and got a couple from the ACC for you. NC State, I actually have them winning the Atlantic over Clemson. This is a team that, you don't traditionally think of for a playoff or a conference title spot, but this could be their best team in school history. Their fans think as much, the media, and Dave Doran, he won't say it out loud, but he's really confident in this roster. Great quarterback, Devin Leary, 30 touchdowns to 5 picks. The defense is littered with All-American candidates, so that's really a team that no one's talking about that could break out. Miami, the same deal over in the Coastal Division. It's always about, is Texas back? Is Miami back? With Miami this time around, they made the financial commitment. They brought in Mario Cristobal. They're fixing their facilities. They're fixing their recruiting game. But in the the short term, they signed 5 starting Power 5 defenders off other rosters. So I think they're poised for a big bounce back. In terms of a win turnaround, I think Nebraska is poised for a huge win column turnaround. They went 3-9 last year. We saw them set an NCAA record with 8 one-score losses. So, some people may laugh at that stat, but they were so close in all these games. I mean, you tend to see one-score games even out. So I think they're poised for a bounce back. They really hit the transfer portal hard. And then lastly, BYU. This is a team that no one's talking about, and I feel like I found a diamond in the rough. The knock on them in 2020 with Zach Wilson was, hey, you didn't play any Power 5s. You did that all against non-AQs. They go out last year. They go 5-0 against the Pac-12. They beat the ACC's UVA, and then they almost beat Baylor, too. It was close in the second half. So that entire roster is back for 2022, the most returning production in America, and a lot of W's on that schedule there. So I have them 15th in the country. No other preview book has them ranked at all. So something's off there, but I really think I found something in BYU, so I'll challenge them on that one.
All right, now I plugged it earlier. I will plug it again. Fantastic book. You want a copy? It has been something that I have been reading for a number of years in the online only version. Was thrilled to get my print copy this year. Really nice. Just kind of check through it all the time. Just when I need to reference something. Really enjoying that. Let people know where they can get their own copy of that and where they can find you on Twitter.
Oh, thanks so much, Tom. Yeah, I always enjoy our chats through the off season, but especially the preseason one. That's all my research coming to fruition. So Yeah, it's pick6previews.com, at pick6previews on Twitter. And it's an annual season preview book. This time, after 10 years of digital only, this time around we have a hard copy. You also get the digital emailed immediately over. So for those 3 days that you're waiting for shipping, you can have access right away to the book. And what goes into it? It's a one-man show. It's just me. I'm covering all 66 Power 5 teams. I'm interviewing head coaches, coordinators, watching spring games, talking to beat writers, listening to local podcasts, everything I can get my hands on, because I'm a competitive guy. The goal is to be the most accurate book, and I've done that the last 5 years. So I'm really excited for this 2022 season. I know my book's a little bit later in the cycle, being that it just released a week ago. But with that, I have some advantages because, the transfer portal has been crazier than ever. A lot of them happened in April, May, even June. So some of these books that went to newsstands in May, they're missing out on a lot of critical data. So mine's a little late in the cycle, but it's definitely the most up-to-date. So go to pick6previews.com. I have sample teams up there so you can see what we're talking about. Some testimonials there, the college game day guys, the ACC network guys, Josh Pate, 247 Sports, tons of stuff on there. So thank you again, Tom. Thanks to the Buckeye fans. One of the most passionate out there. Ohio State, I respect them a lot, the fans, the media, because it's one of the only ones out there that can really match my high passion for the Buckeyes in 2022.
Well, again, thanks to Brett for being here. Always enjoy his insight. Really, really good, deep knowledge of all sorts of teams across the Power 5. Obviously, most accurate magazine over the last 10 years. He seems to know what he's talking about. Always enjoy getting to kind of pick his brain a little bit on the kind of broader national college football picture. So I hope you guys enjoyed that one as well. And do make sure you pick up your copy at pick6previews.com. Follow Brett on Twitter at pick6previews, and that's SIX, not the number, PICKSIX previews.com. And PICKSIX previews on Twitter as well. So that'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. Have a great weekend. And we'll see you on Monday.